forward and we'll start this little puppy going, and the phone is not being cooperative. Okay, let's let this start, and we'll start, because I know your time is a premium and I don't want to keep you extra long. So, and you know I could talk a blue streak, so. Tea. This is only interview 5, so I'm still not so great at this.
Oh.
That's fine. It is what it is. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Permission to Heal. I am Marcy Brockman, and I am thrilled to have you here with today's special guest, Giselle Naidu from, wait, did I do that last name right? Okay. Let's start over.
Perfect.
Let's do that again, because I wanted to clarify that and I wasn't sure. Okay.
Naidu, yeah.
Okay.
Lovely. You pronounced it absolutely beautifully.
Okay. So we'll wait for a minute and I'll start again, flying a pen across the floor. I like to keep the time so I know what I'm doing. Okay, welcome to Permission to Heal. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Marcy Brockman, and I am so thrilled to introduce you to my wonderful guest, Giselle Naidu. She and I both write for the Elephant Journal, the online magazine, and I have been following and devouring her writing for quite a while. I feel like each of the things that she writes, she's speaking to me. Giselle graduated with a master's in social sciences and psychology from the University of Natal in South Africa, when she has a registered psychologist in South Africa since July of 2001. She's also now a registered psychologist in Australia and founded the Courageous Step Psychology practice in 2017. Giselle is committed to offering a professional service to all those who take courageous steps towards their health and well-being, and understands that the journey of healing is a courageous one, and so is deciding to share yourself and your deepest, most painful stories with another. Giselle honors that difficulty and bravery by providing a safe and clear, respectful experience, and is passionate about destigmatizing why people stay so long in abusive relationships, and aims to educate abuse victims and those who love them about the challenges of leaving, the necessity of preparation and planning for the possibility and safety of leaving, and about the recovery process. Having experienced much of this firsthand, she understands how this can cause so much shame that can get in the way of healing, and writes extensively about the psychological skills and knowledge needed to create healthy relationships with ourselves and others. And now you know why I have fallen in love with her. She writes so clearly and so succinctly and so descriptively with such open-hearted genuineness. Genuine? Is that a word? That I feel heard. I feel seen on a different level, and you will too. So welcome to the show, Giselle.
Thank you, Marcy. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. We're also glad you're here. This is going to be a great interview. I can feel it. Okay, so I generally try to begin these with these 6 questions. I modeled them after, there used to be a TV show called The Actors Studio that was on like A&E Network or something years ago. And the guy whose name I can never remember and keep forgetting to look up used to end the interviews with the same group of questions. And I always looked forward to what the different celebrities or actors or whatever, what their answers would be. So that's what I'm trying to do with these. I love the way they go. All right. So what 5 words would you use to describe yourself?
You might have to prompt me a little bit, because I actually...
You did answer them already.
I did answer them so quickly as well. I'd say courageous is one of them.
Yes. Not that this is a test.
Yeah. Genuine.
Mm-hmm.
Generous.
Yes.
Available.
Important.
And connected.
Excellent. I love those. That's excellent. Okay. What is your favorite way to spend a day?
To be honest, I just love the ability to just sit out in the sunshine. If I can have something nice to eat, or have a water at the background, or not too windy. Just a little calm breeze would be beautiful.
I love a breeze.
That's it. That's it.
Excellent. Nice and calm and peaceful, a little food, a little breeze, a
Absolutely.
little sun. Nothing
That's
bad
it.
about that. What's your favorite childhood memory?
We did a lot of traveling when we were kids. So I'd say just going on a holiday. I'd love that. I just remember being wrapped up at the back of the back seat of the car and just asking, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
The typical
Are we there
question.
yet?"
Did you grow up in
Um,
South Africa?
yes, I have. I've grown up in South Africa, so yeah, traveling in South Africa was always an adventure.
Sure.
So, my dad was a great traveler, so we would always get into the car and just go. So we saw a lot of South Africa that way.
Wow. I can only
Yeah.
imagine. That's awesome. My parents were not great travelers. My dad is now that he's a
Yeah.
retired person, but when I was a kid, we didn't really go anywhere. Um, what is your favorite meal? And for most people, this is weather dependent and mood dependent. So.
Absolutely. Sometimes a warm chicken salad, teriyaki chicken salad
Ooh,
with walnuts and camber or something melted. Yeah,
that sounds
bit of
fabulous.
salad.
That sounds fabulous. What one piece of advice would you like to give your younger self? This is always a
Oh,
great question to ask a psychologist, right?
I know. I'd say, and I remember writing this very clearly because it came so quickly to me as to what I'd want to say, and that is just stop proving yourself to everyone.
Yeah, that's
They have
huge.
nothing to prove, and I think it's been the biggest lesson.
Yeah. I have to say that for me as well. I grew
Mm,
up as a people pleaser,
mm,
as we'll get into. And yeah, and realizing that I have innate value without pleasing others, that just
yes,
being me
yeah.
was huge and something that I don't think I really even internalized until my 40s, which is kind of sad, but better late than never. At least
It
I figured
comes
it
later.
out.
It
What?
comes later.
That's fine. What's the one thing you would most like to change about the world?
I think that if we make differences in our relationships, in our closest relationships, we don't have to start really huge. We can't change the world immediately as much as we'd love to.
Right.
But if we make those differences and those changes towards health and well-being in our relationships and having the real connection, I think we can change things very radically around us, for ourselves, for our families, and for
Yeah, I
those that we
agree.
come into connection with. It has a ripple effect too. I think it will just kind of it holds people closer together.
Yeah, and allows empathy and compassion to take root, which I
Yeah.
think we're sorely lacking right now. For me, I tend to go a little bigger, and I want to completely eradicate greed
I know.
because I think
Go big.
so many of the world's problems would be gone if we could eradicate greed.
Yeah. Selfishness. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how to do that. I didn't say we needed a plan. We just
No,
were,
no, no. You just said what was the grand idea. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. We don't have a plan. That's above our pay grade. We don't need that. That's for sure. Okay, so we're going to jump in. I have pages and pages and pages of research because I am nothing but an over preparer, and oh well, that's just who I am. So I got to figure out what order. That's the one thing I didn't do, is figure out what order I wanted to talk about any of this in, because I have 4 articles. We don't need to get to all of them. This may just be another podcast visit. Okay, so let's just start here. You wrote an article called 4 Ways to Quit Ruminating When Our Mind Hurts Us as Much as Our Narcissists. And for me, I think the biggest stumbling block, I was raised by narcissistic, undiagnosed bipolar mother who also happened to be an opiate addict. Just
Mm,
throw that in for good
yeah,
measure.
just do it. Yeah, absolutely.
So I never knew from one moment to the next whether she was going to be Mary Poppins or Cruella de Vil, you know, and it could change on a dime. She
Yep.
never would respond the same way to the same thing. And I always felt like I always felt unloved. I always felt like I wasn't enough. Like I had to be the perfect person. I had to get perfect grades. I had to look just a certain way. I had to keep the room clean. I had to do everything that was in my power and everything that wasn't in my power to please my mother. And of course, that's a losing proposition because you can't really please anybody but yourself. And especially a kid, there were things that I was putting on my own shoulders that were not in my purview.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, and I couldn't ever make sense out of it. So this article about ruminating really hit home for me. Um, and you write you I'm going to read you to you. You said it can
Mhm.
only be described as a hamster on a wheel going nowhere really fast until you're completely drawn into your own head. Your mental playlist is on a loop. It can impact your ability to work, practice self-care, or engage in any responsibilities that are important. We can engage in rumination for any issue we're attempting to make sense of, but rumination is especially evident when relating to a narcissist and narcissistic abuse. And I feel like my whole entire life was like that, and I was stuck. I used to call it a habit trail, but it's the same thing. That
Yep.
little hamster wheel,
Yep.
you know, you're trying to make sense out of things that can't make sense.
It's excruciating, but
Yeah,
it's also so human. We search for meaning, we search for closure, we search for understanding, and sometimes with especially with narcissism, um, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. That's it.
right,
There's no sense to it, and yet the human reaction is to try and figure it out because it should be logical.
right. We're
If I
sense
do
making
this,
people.
yeah,
Right,
absolutely. If I do this, I could get that. I mean, that's really what childhood is about in some ways, is trying to figure out how to get our needs met with our most significant caregivers, which
right,
are mostly our parents.
right. And you run into trouble when you think you've figured it out and then the ground shifts underneath you.
The goalposts change all the time.
All the time. They're moving.
All
You can't kick the ball if the ball,
the
that's a great metaphor.
Absolutely.
Totally crazy. Like there were things like I would say to my mom and every romantic relationship I've ever had in my entire life until my current
Yeah.
husband, who I married almost 4 years ago. Every single relationship was like this because I kept replaying the same script, the same record over and over again, trying to figure it out. And like I figured out how to divorce my ex-husband before I figured out what to do with my mom. And I think
Mm,
that learning
mm,
how to separate
mm.
myself from him
Yeah.
was easier and was a training ground for helping me figure out what to do with my mother.
I think even in my own therapy or and work for myself, one thing that stood out with one of my therapists who said to me, Giselle, how is it possible that we can always say that it's okay to divorce our partners or whomever,
Mm-hmm.
but we never talk about divorcing our families?
Right.
And it's like, it's because loyalty to parents is the heart and soul, because we don't want to feel abandoned from our tribe. Our tribe is supposed to protect us.
Right.
But when our tribe is hostile
We have to give
and
ourselves permission to save ourselves and run.
run. And I think that the biggest cut that we ever have to make with our family members that are not healthy for us, it takes a long time to get there.
Yeah.
It can take 40 years minimum, I think, to most people in their journey
Yeah,
to
I think
really
you have
be
to
able.
figure out how to be an independent person and get to know yourself on a little bit, at least on the inside, before you're strong enough to pull yourself away, before you can and actually start to make sense on your own of what is real and what isn't. Like
Yeah.
my mom had this phenomenal, and I think most narcissists do, this phenomenal ability to turn the whole world upside down. And in a 5-minute conversation, she could convince you that the sky is green and the grass is blue. And even though you knew she was full of crap, you left that conversation going, well, maybe she's right.
She's right. Absolutely. And there's the rumination right there.
Right.
It's
And
like
you stop trusting yourself because
Yeah.
what you're feeling on the inside no longer matches on the outside.
That's it.
It's totally
That's
insane.
it. Totally insane.
It's totally insane. So we came to a point, my mother and I, in January of 2011, when I could no longer stand it. It was the narcissism, it was the bipolarity,
Yeah.
and then to add insult to injury, it was self-medicated opioids. And I think this is interesting. I think if it had only been me she was picking on and only me that she was making crazy, I probably would have put up with it forever. But that night, she started attacking my kids.
There you go. Yeah.
My daughter was 10, my son was 13. She scared the crap out of them. And they went screaming and crying down the hallway, slammed my daughter's door and locked it. And something in my brain, I heard it snap like a light switch, like an explosion of light. And I was all of a sudden the mama lion needing to protect her cubs and her den. And I realized that I bought this house myself. It is my domain. I built this house on love and peace, and there's no freaking way that you're going to get in the way and screw this up. So I threw her and my stepdad out. Get out.
Wow.
Do not welcome here again. Do not come back. And she's screaming at me, hurling insults. It was like a horrible TV show from my front lawn. And then I felt on one level, I knew I was totally right and that I had every right to do what I did, and that that it was my responsibility to do what I did because I had to protect my kids, to end the intergenerationality of the mess.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then I also felt guilty and shameful. What did I do to my mother? I abandoned her. I abandoned all hope of having that relationship with her that I always wanted. So I was grieving and I was miserable. And it took me a long time in therapy to figure out how to put that somewhere. I gave her a shot. I said, if you are willing to do drug rehab and major behavioral management therapy, then I'll be with you every step of the way. You'll never be alone again. But if you decide to not change anything, you will never see us again.
How did she take that?
Well, I wrote it in a letter because she would never have listened to me. She would have hung up on me, or she would have screamed at me. She would never have heard me. So I figured if it's in print, she can't avoid seeing it. And she can take her time, read it at her level, and she called me a couple of times just to yell at me. And her best friend called me to warn me that she was going to be doing that. And she said, don't answer the phone. Let her yell at your answering machine. Don't pick up the phone. Just erase the messages. Don't listen to them. They're not going to make sense. They're just going to hurt you. She's just venomous when she's lashing out. Thank God she said that to me. And so I never spoke to my mother again. Her choice.
Absolutely. We can only invite people into that opportunity to change. It's an invitation. And they have a right to decline it. And I think it's better that way too, because it's open, it's straight, and there's no hidden games. Because I think that in relationships like these, what we say sometimes on the surface is really not what's going on.
Right.
There is always the unconscious underlying game.
Mm-hmm.
So if we hook into that, then we spend a lifetime in chaos,
spinning our wheels in mud. Yeah,
absolutely. So when it's clear and we lay out a clear offer with boundaries, they have a right to decline that, as we too have a right to follow through.
Absolutely. Setting up boundaries is extremely healthy, and I did that for myself, and I did that for my children, and I know as a mom that I did 1,000% the right thing, because she was just a toxic mess. And there wasn't anything that I could do about it. I tried everything I possibly could. She would take no responsibility. We're done. Bye. That's enough.
And Marcy, I think what the struggle is often is that our mind and our heart, they never tend to align sometimes, and it takes a while to get it to that level. And
Right.
there's a lot of people I've worked with would struggle on the, intellectual level, because they know that this is not good.
Right.
They know it's not working. They know how toxic things are, but at the same time, the heart doesn't allow for the full letting go.
Right.
So
Especially when on occasion they do a nice thing. When on
yeah,
occasion there's a generous, happy moment, and then you hold on to that like it's the last piece of bread on earth, you know,
absolutely.
and that keeps you in that hamster wheel forever, ruminating over and over again in that, you can't let go. What do you call that? You had a term for that. Not love bombing. No, you had a thing. You had the euphoric recall,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
that's it. That's it.
Where you're just constantly ruminating over that thing. Well, they loved me once, or we had such a wonderful time. Maybe I can have that again. And then you just keep banging your head against the wall.
You bang your head against the wall trying to figure out how you can recreate that,
Right.
because it is so intoxicating. And when it's our parents, particularly, love is everything.
Yeah,
It's a natural need for a child to want the love and approval of their parent.
of course.
They are the most significant template that we have in our lives. So to yearn for it, even if a child gets a little drop in the ocean, they'll grab onto that.
Absolutely.
It's it. It's life. It's life force for them.
Yeah.
So it's so understandable, and when we sit and work with, adults who are struggling in this manner, we can just see that unmet need in childhood is spinning around in their actual romantic relationships, because
Absolutely.
it's that unmet need that is driving the connection, because you've never had a lot of it. When you get a little drop of it in a romantic relationship, it's just like, whew,
Right.
it's like a drug.
Right. And so many times I felt like, boy, I felt like I came home. This relationship is everything I ever wanted. This is so comfortable. This feels like home to me. And the reason it felt like home, because it was a toxic piece of shit like everything else at home was. Sorry for
That's
those of you
it.
who are listening if I offended you with my language, but that's just the way it is, and it isn't until you get to a point where it is so egregious and so outlandish that you're
Yeah,
like, what the hell am I doing again?
no.
And you wrote about this in the other article that I pulled out. Why keep choosing emotionally depriving romantic relationships? We're consistently emotionally neglected children, used to being emotionally neglected. So we look for people who are going to emotionally neglect us.
It's the story.
That's the story.
That's the story. And stories are consistencies for us. It's the only consistent way that we know. Like, everybody knows once upon a time, and then there's a happy ending, right? Of the end is the fairy tale. And that storytelling is very powerful.
Right.
It's very powerful for us. And so when our unconscious story has been a certain way, it's the only story we know how to tell.
Right. Especially as kids when we don't know anything but that story.
Don't know
You haven't
anything.
had exposure to other people's lives, and you only see certain things when you go to your friends' houses or even your cousins' houses or something. You only see a little glimpse. It's not like you know what it's like anywhere else. I grew up thinking that everybody grew up like I did. My dad worked like 99 jobs because my mother didn't work, so he wasn't around much. And she was just, I loved her, but I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel heard. I didn't feel like you said in this article, my physical needs were taken care of. I had food, I had clothing, I had shelter. I wasn't the obvious neglected. I was the hidden neglected, or the invisible neglect, which is so much harder to explain, to understand, to recognize.
And then, and if we're looking at it in terms of thresholds for like abuse, what we define as abuse, always on the top of the list is your physical, sexual abuse. That's top of the list.
Right.
And we find it harder to prove. And why should we have to? But we find it harder to prove emotional, psychological abuse.
Right. I think I find, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I keep interrupting you, that that we blame the victim, like I think that we, in not believing them, we're showing them disrespect and increasing the neglect, increasing the disconnect. And then they think that they're even crazier.
Absolutely. And we're continuing the story of their lives.
Right.
It's just that way of that creation of that ongoing story and repetition around invalidation, not believing, believing, and in a lot of these unhealthy family dynamics, there is it's not us, it's you.
Right.
You're too sensitive.
Right.
You're not actually communicating properly. You have it so much easier than I ever had it in my life. So
you should be grateful for what you have.
You should be grateful. And you've got this script going all the time as a young child growing up. So you just
internalize the gaslighting.
That's it. And you start to believe that it's me. I have to work hard here because it's not them. They're saying to me that they're fine.
Right.
They're
There's something
okay.
wrong with me. I'm flawed. I'm unlovable. I'm not valuable. I'm too fat, too thin, too stupid, too loud, too anything.
And that's narcissistic programming at its best.
Yeah.
We're programmed from the time we're children.
Yeah.
And if you have a parent with severe mental health issues, but particularly with personality disorders of some sort, particularly narcissism, because it has a lack of empathy and compassion and all of that goes with it, you are programmed to meet the needs of your parent.
Right. So it's compounded. It makes it
doubly
worse.
Doubly worse. So there was never ever a space for you in the first place.
Right.
You are merely an extension, a source of supply.
Exactly. And they were happy, so everything in the world was happy for them. There was no recognition that I was even a part of it. And I know so many people, mostly women, but so many people who have been victimized like this and who have gotten to their 40s or their 50s and they're in terrible marriages and they don't know how to get out because they couldn't fill a shot glass with their self-esteem. They feel stuck. They don't know what to do. And they don't feel capable of or worthy of better. And yet something inside of them gnaws, and like that little inner knowing inside is like screaming for attention. And there's so much outside noise that they're not hearing the inside. And my heart breaks because I know what that feels like. It's awful.
It's the level of trauma that, and often when people come into the therapy space, it's a sacred space.
Yeah. I've been in therapy for 30 years, so I get it. Yeah.
People coming into that space, and it's so much of grief. And, I think it's layered too. So here people go, well, go on, go for therapy and get done. No,
it is not a quick process. It's not like putting a band-aid on something. No,
it's not like sitting down to read your horoscopes or something like that.
You're unpacking years of laundry, years of things that you've sublimated and pushed down because you don't want to deal with them.
That's it. Pushing down for a long time, pushing down with whatever we've done to push it down, whether it's love addiction, whether it's actual addiction, whether it's behavioral addictions, whether it's through food, whatever we're doing, we spend our lives trying to avoid pain because it's natural and it's human to want to avoid pain.
Yeah.
So we spend our lives trying to avoid pain in the best way we know how. And sometimes that's all that it is that it is the best way we know how at those moments in our lives until we know better.
Right.
And that's the fundamental training, even in dialectical behavioral therapy, which I facilitate sometimes in terms of sessions and training within sessions with clients. One of Marsha Linehan's big bits is we do better when we know better. And people are really doing the best that they can.
Right. I think very few of us are malicious about our behavior. They're not purposely saying, okay, well, we don't think Marcy's worth anything, so let's treat her like crap on purpose. You know, they're not doing that. They are, and I would absolutely bet $1 bazillion that both of my parents would 100,000% say that they loved their daughter, but they just went about it in a way that didn't work for me.
No, and I guess that's the big part about it, is to grieving the lack of capacity that our parents have had.
Right.
You know, I think that that's part of our healing as well, because it's recognizing from an adult perspective, but from a child's perspective as well. Like, children don't get that.
No.
They don't get that level that my parent actually doesn't have the capacity to love me the way I deserve.
They
and
don't
need
speak
to
your
be
love
loved.
language. Absolutely.
No,
No.
they're not going to. So it's that stuck belief that they carry with them into their adulthood, still trying to figure out, what did I do wrong to not get the love I needed?
Absolutely. And it really had nothing to do with that. It was just the parent's lack of capacity to do it the way the kid needed the parent to do it. Yeah, when I was, I guess about 20, I was seeing a therapist who, after several months of seeing him,
Yeah.
said one thing that completely changed the way I thought about my relationships with my parents. And it was very similar to what you just said. He said, your parents are not malicious. They're flawed human beings who are doing the best that they know how to do in any given situation. And you have a choice as to whether you're going to accept what they can give you emotionally and then just live with that, or end your relationship with them because you feel it's too damaging for yourself and you walk away. You have a choice.
That's powerful in itself, but I bet to come to that in yourself was huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And suddenly I realized I had a choice. I had the ability, the right, the responsibility to make boundaries for myself, and that it was okay. I had finally reached a point where I could begin to see that it was up to me to allow myself to do that. That it was up to me to give myself the permission to do that. I didn't quite do it yet because I was still only 20 years old, but I did start to see my parents as flawed human beings, that just because they were older didn't mean they had their shit together. Just because they were older didn't mean they were wise and knew what was going on. And it also didn't mean that they were being malicious. It just meant that they were using the tools that they had to the best of their capability, and that was it. And that was just huge. Suddenly it was like, the lenses when you go to the eye doctor and they like switching back and forth, which ones are clear, which ones are not. And suddenly it was like, oh, that's the right prescription. Like, that's clear. That's what it was like. It was amazing. And I think about that conversation far more often than I would have thought. And here I am 52 and I was 20 then.
Why do you think that was the way it was, though, for you? Why did that make such a big difference?
Because I felt at that point when I was 20, my parents were at the end. nearing the end of a very long, embittered, horrible divorce where they were weaponizing me to hurt
Mm.
each other.
Mm.
And I felt completely alone, completely abandoned. My dad had moved in with the woman who became my stepmother, and my mother had moved in with the man who became my stepfather. And so my home where I grew up was sold without me even being told because I was away at school. And then suddenly I want to come home for a family holiday and there's no home to come home to. And yes, they both made me rooms in their new spouses' houses, but it wasn't the same. It was like they had created new family units while I was off in school. And then I was the stepdaughter. I was the guest. And I always felt two steps behind and like there was a door, like a screen door closed between us. I could see what was going on in that room that I wasn't really allowed to be in. And I know that was just my perception but our perceptions are everything. What we think is what we manifest. What we think is what is. And I don't know if I got over that at all until decades later.
Mm. But it almost sounds like, having that option to choose, that control,
Right.
because it's also about a lack of control. I mean, our lives with unhealthy family dynamics and specifically in romantic relationships is about the other person's level of control.
Right. Right.
And
And as a kid, you have none.
You have none. Yeah, absolutely. And you feel like because they're so dominant, they're powerful. Our parents are powerful. Our significant caregivers are powerful beings. We are
Absolutely.
reliant on them. We're reliant on them for all of our emotional needs to be met.
Right.
And not having that control over anything. And I just found that even when, your therapist said that to you, it sounded like you have control.
Right.
You have that ability to choose, and I think that in dealing with very, very toxic personalities, I don't even like using the word toxic, but I think it's just that feeling of dealing with difficult control and power struggles. Because with narcissism, there are always power struggles.
Right.
Every relationship is a power struggle. They don't know how to share power. And healthy relationships is about sharing power and control.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it was a lesson that I had to continually learn. Like I kept thinking like I finally got it, and then I want to say like 10 years ago, I lose track of time. I had a tenant in my house who was a friend of a friend that I knew from a writing group. And she needed a place to stay because she was in between relationships and she didn't have a place to live. And I needed a little extra income, single mom, two jobs, 2 kids, 3 jobs. I needed a little extra money to pay the mortgage. And so I rented her a couple of the rooms at the top of my house here. And I didn't know her well, turns out to be a raging narcissist, very negative, toxic personality. And now she's in my house and she's not paying the rent she promised. And we didn't have a lease. And it was like this crazy mess. And I was trying to get her out of my house. And I was like I was saying to my therapist, who I'm still seeing now, I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm stuck. I can't get rid of this tenant because I can't pay my mortgage without it. And I'm stuck. And she looked at me and she's like, you're not stuck. You're just not seeing all of the options that you have. It's totally within your power. You just don't like all of the options that are available to you. So you're not looking at them. And I was quiet for a minute and I was thinking to myself, what in the freaking hell is she talking about? And then I realized the option was to throw her out, make do with paying my mortgage as long as I could, default on my mortgage, wait for them to evict me, save the money that I wasn't spending on my mortgage, and then rent an apartment. Totally doable. It would trash my credit rating, but who the hell cares? I would save myself and my kids. So that's what I did.
We do what we do.
We do what we do.
We do what we need to do in the moments we have. And there are no perfect solutions in dealing with difficult people.
No.
There are no perfect solutions. It's messy.
Yeah.
And sometimes we want to keep things in a neat box, doing the right thing. There is no right thing.
No,
It's all
the right thing
we
is
can
taking
do.
care of yourself and your children.
Exactly.
That's it.
Safety.
Safety.
Safety first.
Thank you, Maslow. Yeah. Safety's everything. Safety's
Safety
everything.
first. Safety first. And
Absolutely.
actually, even therapeutically, it's the only way to work as well. Safety first. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Well, we've answered so many of the questions that I highlighted here in orange. Okay. So you're ruminating on all of this.
Yeah.
Person is trying to figure out, okay, so I'm separating myself from this toxic relationship or this unhealthy relationship. I'm trying to create boundaries. How do you, what strategies can you use as tools to sort of interrupt that needle repeating on the record? You know, like you're stuck repeating the same story over and over again, and you want to pull yourself out of that. How do you
Yeah.
do that?
It was so interesting because in that article that I wrote around the rumination, and I think I had put in like about 3 or 4, I can't remember, but kind of strategies to break that neural looping, because
Neural
that's what it
looping.
is.
Yeah, that's the
Neural
phrase.
looping.
Anxiety-based neural looping.
Yeah. So it's literally like, the neurons are all kind of firing together in a loop.
Mhm.
And so we have to break it somehow or interrupt that cycle. And I find that this is where people get stuck still.
Yeah.
It's that, and reading through some of the comments, because a lot of people commented on the article as
So
well.
many. Oh my God, there were like 75 comments or something.
It's like, wow. To be honest, I wrote the article inspired by people that I've worked with, clients that I've worked with, but I could see that, like, 10 years later, they still ruminating. It's like, we haven't moved on. And myself working with any difficult managers or whatever, I play the scene over and over and over again.
You
It
make yourself
consumed
crazy.
my mind. I wasn't sleeping. I can't concentrate. And you kind of think, well, people are living like this every day,
Mm-hmm.
consumed by the looping.
Yeah.
They totally detached from what's really going on.
Yeah. And they're stuck in their heads. They're no longer living in their bodies.
Stuck in their heads. And so, is there a simplistic way to do this? I don't
Of
think
course
so.
not. No.
I don't think so. But I think that if we can start to practice that interruption of the loop, so at a very behavioral sort of way,
Mm-hmm.
through mindfulness, through doing things for yourself, becoming more active in your own life, like, take care of yourself, self-care, do some stuff for yourself.
Right.
We have to find ways of interrupting it, but it's also cognitively and emotionally making that click and that connection.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you find that after a long time of doing this, some people experience something like their partner either says something to them that's quite abusive or really like heightened compared to what they're normally used to. And suddenly it's like the penny drops.
Mm-hmm.
Something clicks.
Right.
And I feel that that's the click a lot of people are not getting.
Right.
It's like that, oh my God, the lights are on. It's like the phase of the reawakening phase of the four phases of leaving a narcissist.
Right.
It's that reawakening when the lights have to go on.
Right. Absolutely.
And I find that in terms of interrupting rumination is the very delicate and complex balance of trying to work that through, because my reawakening might not be the same as your reawakening.
Yeah.
What actually shifts it, what actually goes, like, Oprah used to call the light bulb moment.
Right. Right. Like that moment that I threw my mother out. That was the light bulb moment for that. And
That's
I wasn't stuck in that habit trail anymore.
And suddenly it no longer serves you, because you're no longer now trying to fix the person.
Right.
Because a lot of it is trying to fix the person or to
trying
change
to get
yourself.
them to make sense. Like, why did you say that? That didn't happen that way. I find that they rewrite history too. My therapist calls them the people of the lie because they lie so well, so pervasively, so often that
Yeah,
they don't recognize that they're lying. So
yeah,
they'd pass a polygraph test because they don't think they're lying. They believe their revisionist history. And
yeah,
you get stuck in that trying to like constantly, well, that's not what happened. Well, that's not what happened. Well, that's not what happened. Like over and over and over and over again, you make yourself absolutely crazy.
I see. But
And
I think,
I think for me, I started to recognize the pattern of that. And when
yeah,
I recognized the pattern, I put the brakes on it and I said, all right, I'm done. I can't do that anymore. Like
I can,
a couple of years ago, I had a fight with a colleague, totally out of the blue. She misunderstood something that happened. Someone else external to our relationship pissed her off or did something, and she took it out on me. And it ended the friendship. We were friends for 10 years, and the things that she said to me, and it was just done, whatever. And for like 3 days, I was stressed and anxious and crazy. Like, how could she do this? And how could I misread the friendship? And blah, 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 blah. And then finally, I just stopped. It's not up to me. I can't control her. I don't know what happened. She's not
mm,
talking to me anymore.
mm,
She's her own person. I'm my own person, and I'm not dealing with it. She's not going to ruin any more of my life. I'm not spending any more time on this.
yeah.
I'm done. And I threw it in the garbage and walked away. And that was that. But a few years ago, it would have taken me a lot longer than 3 days.
That's it. That is it. And that I think is where the layered level of work is, because I think that the more we work with, you know, the injury to yourself, to your sense of identity, of how one sees ourselves,
Yeah.
I think that that has a very big part to do with what keeps us stuck in these traumatic loops.
Well, that makes
And
sense. I used to worry a lot more about what people thought about me, and now I don't really care.
and a lot of people are saying that it comes with a lot of age, but then I also think that that's not completely true, because we can be, I mean, I work with clients who are in their 60s and late 60s, and they're struggling still. I think that that development of self, that strong sense of I am, this is who I am, and I don't require you to validate it.
Absolutely. I
So
don't need
you
your
can call,
approval or
you can, yeah,
permission.
absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. And you can call me crazy. That is your story of who I am.
Right. And that says way more about you and says nothing about me.
And that's fine. And you know what? I'll take that, and you take your story. Go on. You keep telling everybody that I'm mean and I'm selfish and I'm this and I'm that, but I no longer care to take that on.
Exactly.
And sometimes the more we get stronger in our sense of ourselves, where we no longer seek other people to approve of us, to say that we're okay, to also say that we're not crazy, you know, and I spend my whole life trying to show you I'm not crazy.
Right.
uh, and then you still say I'm crazy, because I still feel crazy, because I'm so stuck on this idea of making you see who I am. So the stronger we get in saying, this is who I am, you do not have to like it,
Right.
but this is who I am, and I'm okay with that. And the stronger we get with that, the easier our reawakening phases are.
Sure. The easier we'll stick to our boundaries, the easier it'll be to keep
We're not
our
fighting.
right.
We're not struggling. We're not having this internal struggle with ourselves anymore.
Right. We've gotten clarity. Things are no longer muddy. Yeah. It's huge.
It is
It's
so
huge.
huge.
Yeah.
It's so huge. And so when people talk about working inside out, that is the inside out. And it's
Yeah.
an honoring of the inside out. And that takes time, and that takes that compassion, and that takes that tenderness around that. But the stronger we get around being who we are,
Being
flaws
compassionate to ourselves,
and
being
all,
empathetic to ourselves. Right.
flaws and all,
Flaws and all. Yeah.
Oh, that's it. This is it. This is me.
This is me.
And
this is me
I'm
today.
okay with that.
Yeah.
And somehow I feel like that also is the turning point in our lives and our struggles with relationships that are difficult, because then we don't have to please till the point of depletion. We
Right.
don't have to feel overly responsible for another person's well-being, because we're not defined anymore
By how
what we
they
do.
see us, or our perception of how they see us, because it doesn't even matter. It doesn't play into it.
Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. And I think that once we get authentic and real with ourselves, we will be with people that will be real with us too.
Absolutely. And it absolutely just happens that way organically. It does. After my divorce, I was single for 10 years and I was dating, doing the online dating thing. And I was dating a lot. I was a serial monogamist. I'd get into a relationship for a while and then that would end and I'd find someone else and then that would end. And they were all various levels, a variety of levels of narcissistic crazy men. And some more or less than others and whatever. But, they all didn't work. And there was a point there, probably 7 or 8 years ago, when I was dating a lot of different men, one after the other, because I was going on a lot of first dates. And, I was playing my grandmother's game, find a husband game, because it was sort of like the only dating advice that I had gotten was from my grandmother. So we know this isn't all that good. And I was trying to make myself attractive to him. I was trying to be pleasing to him so that he would like me. And there was like all of this pressure on first dates because I was trying to be what somebody that I didn't know would like. So it was impossible to predict. I've never met you before. We've never sat across the table from each other before. And yet I'm trying to please you so that you'll like me. And I had an awful time. I was having all these horrible dates. I felt like crap. I didn't want to go. I was too stressed. And yet I was so lonely that I really wanted someone in my life and I couldn't figure it out. And then I was doing a lot of writing and a lot of reading and a lot of research, because that's what I do when I can't figure out what something is. I try to make sense out of it and I read everything I can. And I was in my therapist's office every week. And then I was sitting across the table from some guy. I have no idea who he is. Doesn't even matter. In a really nice restaurant. And suddenly it was like someone hit me over the head with a 2x4. I had this epiphany, a light bulb moment, if you will, where I realized that it was totally irrelevant if the guy liked me. What only mattered, the only thing that mattered was if I liked me in that moment with that guy. Did I feel comfortable enough to just say, this is me, this is who I am, take it or leave it? And I stopped dating these people who were not good for me.
That's it.
And I did a little regrouping. Yeah. And then it took me a while. And then 5 years ago, Thanksgiving 2015, I was reading an article in the middle of the night on Elephant Journal on my phone. It's 3:00 in the morning. I'm crying. I'm lonely. My mother had died like a couple of years before. And I was talking to her, because I talk to my dead mother because she can't argue back. So it's perfect. And I'm like, why is life like this? And when am I going to meet somebody who's worthy of me? I'm so great. I'm such a badass woman and I'm just alone. And then I read this article. I have no idea. I have it down to like 5 options of which article it was because I didn't save it, but it was Elephant Journal and it was about soulmates. And what the article said was that you reach a point, and I don't really necessarily believe in soulmates as a thing. I'm not sure. The jig is up on that. But basically, once you reach a certain age, you've already met your soulmate. Could be your sister, could be your daughter, could be your best friend, could be your husband or girlfriend or wife, or, it could be anybody. Could be your therapist, like whoever. But the person would have this particular set of qualities. And I read the list I don't even remember what the qualities were, really. I read the list, and the first person I thought of was my friend Michael, who I'd been friends with since 1987. We never dated. We were never romantically connected. Why would I think of him that way? Really? And I thought about it, and I wiped the tears off my face, and I thought, maybe. So before I could stop myself, I Facebook instant messaged him the article, 3:00 in the morning. And I said, read this article, and if you think this could be us, let me take you to dinner so we can talk about it. And then I went, holy shit, what did I just do? I could ruin a 30-year friendship. What if he doesn't feel that way? And now it's awkward. And oh my God, I'm just going to, and I was like freaking out all night. And then I got a phone call from him the next day. And he said, he's much more religious than I am. He said that night, that exact night, he had gone to bed praying for a woman exactly like me to come into his life. And then he woke up the next morning with my message in his inbox.
Message, absolutely.
So he's like, never before has God answered. He's religious. So never before has God answered a prayer so literally and so quickly ever.
Yeah.
But what was significant about this relationship, and I did marry him. I proposed to him 7 months later, and we got married less than a year later after we started dating. What's significant is that he experienced a lot of the same childhood trauma and emotional abandonment, and his took on a little bit more physical because it's the whole nature of his crazy family. But the wounds may have been different, but the scars were the same. And we understood each other on a cellular level, and I got to be 100% myself, my quirky, weird, smart, creative, insane, overly sensitive, whatever self. And no matter what I threw at him, no matter what weird angle of myself I let show up, he's like, I want more. That's great. And I'm the same way with him. And it's like we finally did enough of the internal work and enough of the realizations on ourselves to figure out that this is really where it is.
And I think that maturity of love, I think a lot of people struggle with that. They kind of, they say, but how do I know? How would I know if it's the right one or this is it? And, they spend so much of time obsessed in their dating lives. They have to just feel it with someone. But that's not necessarily mature love and healthy love connection or conscious, relationships. They're very different. They're about two people showing up to each other.
Right.
And if you can't stay with your own self, you really can't stay with somebody else either. You
Absolutely.
can't show up for yourself. How are you going to show up for somebody else?
Right.
So
you need the self-compassion in order to give the other person compassion and empathy. And you need to not be afraid to be vulnerable, because it's more courageous to be vulnerable. It's more brave to be vulnerable, but you have to be able to do that with somebody else, or there is no intimacy. There is no trust.
That's it.
Right.
And I think that's that I think is where most of it is at, is because why this journey takes time. Why when you're ready, love will find you.
Right.
When it you don't have to put in all this work to maneuver it and to bring it to your
there was no game playing, there was no guessing, there was no anything. It was just really clear.
None of it. But it's alignment. It's when the timing is right. There's a book that I read, Love Will Find You. Love will find you. And I really believe that it's love will find you in whatever. And you're right about that. I think what's difficult for a lot of people is the recovery journey from narcissistic abuse.
Yeah.
Because they're two different things. That, being in relationship with people who are or have a particular personality disorder, and narcissism is the one we talk about the most, but there are others. Sure. So the ones that we talk about the most, like narcissism, we have to almost work our way out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And only when we work our way out of it safely, can we actually start the recovery process. Right. Because we have to recover from the abuse. And I think some people push too hard to get fixed and
Right.
sorted. And I'm well now, and therefore I'm going to meet someone who's going to be well too. And they soon find that they meet another narcissist or,
Right.
another problematic relationship, because the healing is
Oh,
not, it's not deep enough. It's not grounded enough
right.
in making and strengthening that sense of self. And I think that this is where there are two different processes. Getting out is one,
Sure.
recovering from, it's another. It's the other leg.
Right. And the recovery, like you said, it takes a long time. Even if you're dedicated and focused on it, it takes a long time because there's a whole lot of piles of dirty laundry in the corner that you just keep throwing things over because you don't want to deal with them. But you got to dig it all out there and go through the laundry. I don't know if that's a good metaphor or not, but
Going with that. We're going with that,
we're going
Marcy.
with that. We're
We're
going with
going with
that.
that. It's a lot. It's a lot. You can't. And again, people want their whites to shine brighter and whiter.
Here we
It
go.
doesn't
Clean
work that
laundry.
way.
No,
You know,
absolutely.
it doesn't. It's mucky still, and sometimes there's still stains on it, and it's okay. And when we feel healthier and when we feel more open
Hmm.
to having real connected relationship, that relationship in itself will become therapy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we do that for each other all the time. And I see like my dad and my stepmom, they do that for themselves all the time. They have like become sort of a model. My dad's relationship with my mother was toxic and awful for both of them.
Yeah.
Um, and in his remarriage, he found something healthy and whole and adult, and they're there for each other in ways that I didn't know people could be there for each other. Like they became a model for me, you know, because I didn't see that ever
You
before.
didn't say absolutely. And I think that's where we all struggle. If we haven't seen healthy relationships, we only have textbooks to help us figure it out.
Or
And
movies, which are ridiculous.
ridiculous, and so we don't know what real relationships look like. We have no clue.
Right.
And we don't have that as a programming yet.
Absolutely.
So it's, yeah, I think, for me, I'm a poster child for therapy. It's my trade, my tool, my life, but it's something that I will never be out of either. You don't
It's
have to be
necessary.
well to be in therapy.
Right. Right. I
This is
think
the
I'm
thing.
better than I've ever been ever
Yeah,
before. But
yeah,
I love the relationship I have with my therapist. We've been together for more than 10 years. So
yeah.
it's moved past a little bit of the traditional therapeutic relationship. We're more friends now that I still pay her, whatever. But I just adore her. And I can't, she in many ways is the Jewish mother that I no longer have or that I
Yes,
never had to
yes,
start with.
yes,
And
yes.
I don't know what I would do without Barbara, you know. I just
Honoring.
she's
That's
amazing.
it. That's
Yeah.
it. It's the healing of the parent we never had, and
Yeah.
that's really what,
And it's
therapy.
unconditional and she
Yeah,
doesn't judge me and I can say anything and be as vulnerable and open you know, as I would have never thought I could dare to be and it's all good. It's all good. It's all good. And she calls me on my shit and she recalls, when I'm being too hard on myself and I'm not valuing the strength and the tools that I have and the talents that I have, she reminds me and makes me listen, which I think we all need somebody to do that.
yeah, yeah. And maybe that's it. We just need that one secure attachment,
Yeah, it's huge.
our secure base. We can do our adventures and exploring in the world, but we can always come back and touch our secure base
Absolutely.
and recharge, refuel, reconnect. But always that secure base connects us deeper with ourselves. And through all of the shit shows that we've had in life,
Yeah.
people have had a lot and they've struggled with a lot. But I think for me, what I would hold on to is taking personal responsibility.
That's huge.
Take personal responsibility. And as you said, we can't blame others. We're not victims. There's no villains in the story. Everybody has their woundedness
Right.
that shows up in our lives. So it's about saying, hang on, from here on out, I didn't have a lot of choices when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't. There's some of it so horrendous. But in the here and now, with my adult resources, with my secure base, how am I going to make choices that are for me? Honoring, mindful, respectful of myself and those that I love.
Beautiful.
And I think that is the guiding measure in our lives. When we work with ourselves, when we touch each other, when we have connection with each other, it's really just saying, I have choice in everything that I do, and I can choose for better or I can choose for worse.
Right. And let's not do that.
Let's not do that.
Exactly. Exactly. And then to allow ourselves to embrace the good choice, to embrace the base and embrace the love and allow the mutual vulnerability and to show up 100% with kindness and empathy and compassion, not only for our significant other or whoever is in that relationship with us, but for ourselves as well. I think that's a really good note to end this on.
Because we might go on forever.
We could go on forever. Absolutely. This has been amazing, Giselle. I think you're a light and a love and such an open-hearted, amazing hero you are. I just think you're great. And thank you so much for accepting my invitation and coming on the show.
It's a pleasure, a privilege. And thank you for the work you do. This is how we pay it forward.
I'm trying. I figure, I said to Waylon Lewis once, I said, if I had to go through all of that shit, then at least I can help give some healing for other people and give other people the benefit of my pain and my own healing journey and, maybe shorten someone else's struggle. So that's it. So we all have to give ourselves permission to heal, permission to love, permission to be compassionate to ourselves, give ourselves the space and grace to get through all the tough times. We can do hard things. We can overcome. We can heal. And we just have to give ourselves time and faith and focus. Yeah. Thank you so much, Giselle.
It's a pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure.